In the theater of Australian politics, some relationships seems permanent fixtures until suddenly they are not. Today, we're witnessing what might be the most significant political restructuring of our generation. Imagine waking up to discover that a century-old political partnership has suddenly dissolved. That's exactly what happened. National Party leader David Littleproud made his stunning announcement. The coalition that has defined conservative politics in Australia for decades is no longer more. It's a systematic shift that redraws the map of power in Canberra and reshape how regional and urban Australia are represented. Consider this. Only three times in over 100 years has this alliance fractured. Today, we're living through the political history that future generations will study. Behind closed doors, the fracture points we're building: nuclear power, regional funding, supermarket competition. But beneath these policy disagreements lies something more fundamental: a struggle for identity in Australia whose demographic and priorities are rapidly evolving. What does this mean for rural communities whose voices have long been amplified through this partnership? For urban liberals navigating a changing electorate? For a Labor government watching the opposition divided itself? Today, on Part 8A, we're joined by Dr. Daniel Fazio of UniSA Justice and Society, who brings unprecedented insight into this political earthquake. We'll explore not just what happened, but what it means for Australia's political future. Is this truly the end of the coalition as we know it, or just another chapter in a complicated relationship that has survived a century of Australian politics? Stay with us as we unravel this compelling narrative that affect every Australian, whether they realize it or not. I'm your host, Miko Santos, and this is Part 8A. Hello, Dr. Daniel Fascio. Welcome to the Part 8A. How are you today?
Good. How are you? And thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for that. All right, let's dive right in. The coalition just split up after a decade together. Walk us through your immediate reaction when you heard David Littleproud announcement. Were you genuinely surprised, or were there's warning sign we should have been watching?
There were some warning signs. Both senior members of the National Party and the Liberal Party had each suggested that perhaps a split was best. So it wasn't a total surprise. But when it came down to the crunch, I didn't really think that they would split. So in that sense, taking that final step to split, yes, that was a little bit of a surprise to me. Yes.
Hmm. David mentioned this has only happened three times in over a century. Can you put this moment in historical context for our watching right now or listener? What were those previous breakup about, and how does this one compare?
Okay, maybe one of the most notable ones was 1941, when the then United Australia Party, which was the predecessor to the Liberal Party, splintered, and they were in coalition with the Country Party. And in 1941, they broke apart. Now, what happened after that is in 1944, Robert Menzies founded the modern Liberal Party. And then when they got elected to office in 1949, they did so as a coalition. So they came back together. Right? In 1987, when the then Queensland Premier Joby Peterson launched a campaign to run for Prime Minister, there was a split within the coalition then as well, but it was state-based. So it was the Queensland Nationals split from the Nationals Australia-wide. And that did a lot of damage to the Conservative campaign in 1987. But again, after that, they came back together. Because if you have a look at the numbers in Australian politics, you have a look at the demographics and where all the seats are distributed. There's only been three times in Australian political history: 1975, 1977, and 1996, where the Liberal Party has managed to win enough seats to govern in its own right. Uh, every other time, when the coalitions form government, they need each other. So this split here will have immediate consequences for Australian politics generally and for the Liberal and National Party. But over the long run, I expect that they'll have no option other than to come together again, because if you have a look at the raw numbers, they need each other to be able to form majority governments.
That's gonna be an interesting. We're gonna look up because it's gonna be, they're gonna split, so it's gonna be hard to say how they can work together. So let's
Yes.
talk about what actually broke the camel back: nuclear power, regional Australia future funds, supermarket divestiture powers. Which of these surprised you most as coalition ending issue?
Yeah, look, all three we can probably give equal weighting to. They certainly would have; those policy positions would have been part of the mix. There's no doubt about that at all. But perhaps connecting the three of them, you just have a look at the results of the recent election, and the National Party was able to hold on to virtually all of their seats. I think they may only lose one, but that's still in doubt. And the Liberal Party lost heavily in the urban areas. So their remaining members of Parliament are mostly regional. Some very few in the urban areas, mostly regional. So it's all about the demographics here. This is about the Nationals, I think, trying to position themselves, or to, if you like, create an identity separate to the Liberal Party, so that they maintain that electoral support without, from their point of view, perhaps being seen to be tainted by being connected to the Liberal Party. And the other thing is, because of the huge losses in Liberal seats, the balance between the National Party and the Liberal Party in terms of their current parliamentary representation is more equal. So that gives the National Party more clout. So the nuclear power issue, yes. The regional funds, yes, and the supermarket issue, yes. But there's the demographics of the politics of the last election is the issue that connects all three of those issues.
Well, Little Proud was pretty passionate about nuclear power, comparing Australia to the UK, US, and France. Is it really about energy policy, or is there a bigger political strategy at play here?
Yeah, there probably is a political strategy at play, but energy policy, yes, that's a big issue, because that's been the most difficult issue for the coalition to resolve, and there's a clear difference there between urban liberals and regional liberals, and especially the National Party as well. The National Party have been the strongest proponents of nuclear power. Regional liberals have been lukewarm, and urban liberals have their support has been problematic, to say the least. So if you're looking for a policy division, the nuclear one would be the one that has caused the greatest tension between the two, for sure.
Mhm.
The greater political strategy, I think this over the short term, this is about survival and identity differentiation. But as I said before, as we get over the short to medium term, it will probably cause them a lot of damage. But as we get towards the next election and beyond that, if they're serious about once again governing together as a coalition, they'll have no option but to come together, because otherwise neither of them can govern Australia in its own right. The numbers are simply just not there. And at some point, both sides will realise that. The other issue that could be at play here, even though no one's yet mentioned this, is so the previous coalition agreements, depending on the number of seats that each side wins, that determines how many people you have in the shadow cabinet. And perhaps they weren't able to agree on who would represent who in the shadow cabinet as well. That could be another issue that's caused this.
Okay. So one of the when he's announcing this, the one of point that I was looking at is that the divestiture of powers for supermarkets, that's not your typical political talking points. Help us understand why this becomes such a red line issue for the national. What's really going on with supermarket competition in regional Australia?
Yeah, okay. It was okay. So that's the point here. So we need to remember who the Nationals represent. So in regional Australia, the big supermarkets have basically squashed out any competition from smaller players. Say an IGA or here in South Australia, Foodland. Those small supermarket operators, and it's dominated by Coles and Woolworths. So therefore, there's not much price competition, and therefore many things tend to be more expensive in these areas than they are in urban areas where there is some competition. So this has really hit the very base of the National Party support, which is why they've been running on this for quite a long time now. It goes to, if you like, real day-to-day cost of living issues for the people that they represent. Right? And this is the feedback that all National Party members are getting. And this is why they've been running on this for, as I say, for quite a while now.
Mhm. So both Little Fraud and his deputy Kevin Hogan keep using the word principled, almost like they were trying to convince us this wasn't just a political maneuvering. Do you buy that framing, or is there more strategic calculation here?
Look, if you have a look at what Little Prout has said over a period of time here, and some of the senior nationals as well, including people like Bridget McKenzie, to give them their due, they have at least been consistent in their public statements. So if we just take that alone, they haven't wavered from their policy positions in any way, and in many ways have actually been quite stringent, especially since the big election loss. But the strategy there could also be to remind their supporters that no matter what, they will always be there to represent them, and it's about making sure that they solidify the support that they do have in country Australia. So perhaps they're seeing that for the Liberal Party, the road back may be difficult, but as long as they can keep their base in regional Australia, they'll have that continue for the National Party. That is, they'll have that continued parliamentary representation. So a lot of this does go back to, if you like, self-preservation. They will be determined to keep their presence and to hold on to as many of their seats as possible. And now that they've split from the Liberal Party, they can absolutely 100% concentrate on the people who they are representing and speak on their behalf and raise their views and their issues without having to worry about how the Liberal Party will relate to that or whether they can accommodate their prescriptions or not. Are we all good here?
Sorry. All right.
That's right. Is everything okay?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So here's the big question. Our listener probably wondering: can
Yep.
either party actually win government alone? Have the
Uh,
national basically made themselves and the rivals permanently irrelevant?
can they win government alone together? No, no. It's highly, highly unlikely. The National Party, I would, one can never say definitely in politics. The National Party, extremely, extremely unlikely. Right? Their representation is just too low and too concentrated in only parts of Australia for them to be able to win a national election. Even the Liberal Party would find it very, very difficult to win on their own. As I said before, in the history of the Liberal Party since World War II, on only three occasions, 1975, 1977, and 1996, did they win enough seats to be able to govern on their own. But both of those respective prime ministers, Malcolm Fraser in the first two instances and then John Howard in the third instance, even though they won enough seats to govern in their own right, they kept the coalition agreement because they were certain that in future elections they would need the coalition, and indeed they were both correct because that's what turned out to happen. So if we have a look at history, it would be very, very, very difficult for either the Liberal Party and certainly the National Party to win a majority in their own right. And if you have a look at the current demographics of the Australian population and where the seat distribution is, it would be almost impossible for them alone to win to win a majority. So, as I
Kevin,
said, they will probably have to come back together in some way at some point in the future. Whether that's sooner or whether that's later, that's whether it's in the next term of Parliament, who knows? But there's going to have to be an inevitable cooperation there if they want to govern in majority.
Thank you so much for that. Kevin Hogan made this interesting comparison to a relationship breakup. Sometimes you get back together stronger. Realistically, what will it take for these two parties to reunite before the next election?
That's the relationship analogy is interesting. Uh, Clearly, that they have common interests in representing the centre right, the conservative side of Australian politics. The big problem for them is going to be the urban-rural regional divide, and how they're going to be able to bring that together is just going to be really really hard. If we have a look at where the current divisions are,
Mhm,
uh, at the very least, I would have to agree on energy policy. I can't see that happening anytime soon. I mean, it could happen, but I probably can't see that happening anytime soon. Uh, so over the short term, it'll probably be difficult. Maybe for political purposes, uh, if they both get sick and tired of losing and realise that they have to cooperate, then maybe over the medium to the longer term, there's more of a chance that they'll be able to come together. But if they do that, they'll have to. There's going to have to be policy compromise. There's going to have to be a bit of give and take on both sides. Look, is that possible? Yes. When and how? That's just too early to tell now. Too early to tell.
So from
Future electoral defeats may be the thing that concentrates both of them and says, "Look, we need to work together here."
Mhm, mhm,
At the moment, I think what will happen over the short to medium term is they'll both stake out their positions and make sure that they keep their base and then try and expand from that.
mhm. From Anthony Albanese perspective, does this give a Labour an easier path to re-election, or does a fractured opposition actually create new challenges for them?
Look, both in terms of electoral politics alone, yes, it makes it a lot easier for Labor. They can claim that they're the truly party that represents all of Australia. In terms of the parliamentary representation, the opposition is fragmented, so that makes it harder for them together to oppose in a concerted way any Labor policies that they disagree with. So yes, in the short to medium term politically, it does make things a lot easier for Labor. The danger there, of course, is from Labor's perspective, complacency. That they'll want to watch out. They'll want to be very very careful about that too, because if Labor get too complacent, that'll be the fastest road back to opposition for them. But if Labor can govern reasonably successfully and keep pointing to the fact that the opposition is divided, see, a divided opposition will find it harder to offer the Australian people a united front. And it'll, especially if they disagree on key policy areas, it'll be hard for them to uh, not to see those divisions exposed. And with the Australian public seeing that, it'll be a lot harder for them to present a united front and say, "Hey, look, elect us, we can do a better job." Because Labor's response will be, they can't even agree among themselves. How can they possibly govern the country?
Mhm,
Uh, so I think for the short to medium term, yes, this does advantage Labor. Over the longer term, perhaps not. But the other danger here is just for democracy in general. In a parliamentary system like we have here in Australia, it is essential that there is a strong opposition to keep the government accountable, because transparency and accountability are really, really critical. So this does open up uh, some unwanted problematic negatives there as well for the functioning of democracy in this country, where a strong opposition is necessary. But it's going to be hard for the Liberal Nationals to provide that if they themselves are now split apart. Like for instance, the National Party will now be no longer now be part of the formal opposition. That'll be just the Liberal Party. Yeah, I mean, the attacks on Labor will be fragmented and therefore less effective.
with the coalition split, how does this change the whole parliamentary dynamic? Are we looking at more power crossbench or different alliance possibilities?
Uh, Both of those. In the lower house, in the House of Representatives, where Labor has a huge majority, it doesn't matter. Labor will control that chamber, and they will do whatever they want. But the Senate will be the interesting house to watch, the upper house, where yes, the fragmentation of the coalition that does open up possibilities for new coalitions to form. So Labor now has more options in terms of trying to get legislation passed. On one hand, they may just need the support of the Greens, but it's actually possible to that with, say, rural and regional initiatives, they could get the Nationals to support them as well. So that gives them more options in terms of negotiating with the Senate as well. It may take longer, but it gives them more options. So there could be, and I emphasise that there could be. I'm not saying there will be. There could be more flexibility when we see Senate negotiations over specific parts of government legislation.
Thank you for that. My last question, and I want your honest take here. Is this the end of the Liberal National Coalition as we know it, or just a dramatic pause in a relationship that's survived over a century of Australian politics?
Yeah. Look, that's a great question, and the only way we'll know the answer to that is over the long term. What I'll offer here is this: so they've broken apart. Even if they do come back together, right, it'll probably be a different agreement. So it'll be a new coalition, recreating the old coalition. Especially the longer that they're apart, recreating the old coalition probably won't happen. So they can, and I think they probably will come together, but it'll be a new agreement. It'll be a new relationship.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel Fazio of UniSA Justice and Society, for your time.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much. This is another episode of Part 8A, and see you again next week. Thank you.
Subscribe to Manchari for news with authentic Gen X perspective, cutting through the noise with zero fluff. Available now across all podcast platforms. News without the noise, perspective without the panic.